This is checklist number 14, active mass shooter actions. And I'm the creator of the CSI Checklist, Tom Mauriello. I direct your attention to the asterisk at the beginning that states, this is a quick checklist of the essential actions to be taken during an active mass shooter incident. For detailed procedures and protocols, you should refer to your department's standard operating procedures. And you can also review the resources section in this app that has more detailed information. You might say, I don't have time to go over checklists when I'm responding to an active shooter incident. Of course you don't. But to help you act in an intuitive manner when responding to such a call, periodically reviewing this checklist during your downtime while on duty will help you remember your training and responsibilities instinctively when having to act. Also, after the threat has been neutralized and you are back at the station and writing your report, this checklist will help ensure that your report is accurate and complete. What I'd like to do now is highlight some of the key actions in this checklist associated with responding to such a call. This will give you an understanding of what the checklist is all about and how useful it can be for you. 14A, initial response by law enforcement. There's a series of things that you need to consider. First being, when you get there, immediately advise dispatch that you're there and where you are. Determine how quickly backup officers will come, because you have to understand you must engage the shooter as quick as possible. You need to consider giving accurate information to those who are looking for refuge, students, members of the public, if it's a mall environment or whatever it might be, to get them away from the kill zone and possibly barricade themselves in a secure structure. So the key is stop the killing, ensure that the shooter has been neutralized and the threat has been eliminated. 14B talks about communications by law enforcement. If you're the first officer at the scene, it's your job to communicate information back to dispatch. If we have multiple officers talking to dispatcher at the same time, that can be difficult. So whatever you can do to ensure that one person is doing the communicating will be helpful. Also, make sure that you're using non-technical language when communicating, not only on the radio, but also when you're communicating with on-scene civilians, so they understand your direction. So don't forget, establish one main communicator as the breach progresses. 14C are multiple actions in reference to capturing the shooter. I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of them, visually examine the room containing the shooter and conduct a quick recognition of any additional threats. Don't assume that it's a one shooter activity. There could be multiple shooters. They could be, besides firearms, there could be bombs set, etc. Do not assume in apprehending one shooter that other shooters may not be in the vicinity, as I just mentioned. Again, you can go through these. Continually assess the risk until the shooter has been taken into custody, and take note of what they say and what they brought with them. For example, other weapons, explosives, notebooks, backpacks, things that might be left at the scene that might be overlooked. 14D, initial medical triage of the injured. The law enforcement is usually the first ones at the scene. Either the medical services is waiting to be asked to be brought in. You need to be concerned with the most severe injured, with severe hemorrhaging and blocked airways, etc. So law enforcement's job is to do an intuitive triage based on your training, experience, and general impression of the injured that you see. Once the threat is neutralized and the scene secure, then law enforcement should hand off casualty care to emergency medical services. 14E, evidence preservation and collection, something that is difficult to think about during and right after the threat is neutralized, but it's up to law enforcement to consider it. Ensure no one discards any items with potential evidence value. That's law enforcement personnel, EMS, other first responders, the media, civilian staff, bystanders, anybody that may have some potential evidence needs to be held, and any of that evidence must be preserved or collected. Again, there's a number of steps here. Prioritize the preservation of physical evidence that may be more easily contaminated or lost from atmospheric conditions. So if there's evidence on the outside and it's raining and some evidence could be lost or destroyed or contaminated, that's up to law enforcement to consider. All firearm related evidence should not be moved until photographed and recorded by law enforcement. And this is a difficult thing to say because some people want to immediately um, make sure that firearms will not go off or etc. But it's important to try to leave them in the areas that they are in. 14E1, evidence related items. Some are obvious, projectiles and casings and the weapons themselves. But things like the victim's clothing and other personal items, those are evidence related and need to be properly secured and collected. The shooter clothing and other personal items should be collected. So be looking for those things. If victims and shooters are being taken away by EMS, somebody has to ensure that anything that they're working with are used, any medical devices, anything that may have blood or DNA or whatever, needs to be collected for evidence. There's a whole series of weapons identification here just to help you to remember what type of weapons you saw or involved with were used by the shooter or shooters. Also, there's a series of explosive devices to help you remember and ask the right kinds of questions. 14F has to do with interviewing witnesses. 14F1 talks about open-ended questions like what happened, what did you see, what did you hear, did you know the shooters, were they former students, co-workers, patrons, or customers. Uh, those are the open-ended type questions. Then you get into specific questions like when did you first encounter the shooter? What rooms were the shooters in? How many shots did you hear? All those questions become very important ultimately when you're getting statements from witnesses. The medical examiner / coroner actions and responsibilities. Depending on your jurisdiction, you'll have a medical examiner or a coroner. One or the other, they both have the same responsibility, and that's to deal with the fatalities, to determine the manner, cause, time, and circumstances of the death. So they are responsible for the bodies that are on the scene. 14G1 talks about their responsibility to obtain an estimated number of fatalities, determine whether the population was open or closed. By open population, we mean, is it a location like a mall where you don't know how many people were there, you don't know their names, etc. A closed population like a school is where you literally can obtain lists of exactly who was at the school, the students, exactly the staff members, etc. So at least when you're looking for people, you'll have a better chance. So the medical examiner will be involved in that, and certainly law enforcement will help. 14G2, on-scene procedures that they're going to be concerned with, that they definitely will be looking for law enforcement to help with, and that's to set up a secure perimeter, make sure that unauthorized personnel are away from the scene, and determine locations for the remains evidence recovery personnel to check and package evidence and document findings. That needs to be planned and worked with. The last one, 14H, handling the media for all responses. Really important. Initial responding officers should not disclose any details to the media. Designating spokesperson should do the following. And there's a number of things. And if they are the PIO, police information officer, then they know exactly how to deal with the media and to protect information. Should encourage victims and witnesses to avoid contact with the media or exposure to media accounts concerning the incidents. Again, these are high-level actions to aid the first responder in remembering their key responsibilities. It's a tool that is always with you to keep you sharp and ready to act.